I'm an artist and a professor of art. And 4 years ago, I had a shift in the way I think about educating artists. This wasn't one of those little shifts. This was a tectonic plate shift. And it made me realize that I was going to have to make some changes in how I approached educating artists. In 2011, I was just back from taking a group of students to Ghana, West Africa. For 3 weeks, we studied sustainability, culture, and art at the Kokrobite Institute outside of Accra. And in that 3 weeks, I witnessed my students not only learning the material, but also I observed them changing the way they saw themselves in the world. They were becoming world citizens. It was remarkable to observe, but not unusual. Many faculty members bring students abroad, and they often find that this is a life-changing experience. But I felt that I had gotten a glimpse of a future for education of artists. And it really changed the way I saw things once I got back home. Meanwhile, in my vegetable garden, I was learning how to apply more ecological gardening methods to grow my vegetables. I wanted to rely less on pesticides and work with nature rather than against her. That led me to study permaculture. Permaculture is a design system based on the way nature operates. In permaculture, we use patterns and principles as a way of designing things, whether that's a garden or a farm or a community. And at this point, I was also aware that we were getting better and better data on global warming. Here's an example of a graph that's showing us how much ice is melting every month in the Arctic. And I was taking in these graphs, and I was also taking in a lot of photographs. I bet you've noticed when you look at this picture of another mammal experiencing that situation you saw described in the graph, that it feels very different. There's a reason for that. The way we process images and emotions, and the part of our brain, in fact, and perhaps most importantly, that handles motivation, is the limbic region of our brain. The limbic region of our brain helped me realize something about artists in the 21st century. For you art lovers and for you artists, you know that that part of the brain that handles form, psychology, and humans' most important desires and needs, well, that's the stuff of art. That's where you are when you're experiencing art. And this helped me realize that I really needed to make some changes in how I was preparing artists for their future. That's when I started to apply this notion of using nature's curriculum to change an art curriculum. Now, this was a daunting moment. If you know anything about academia, you know it's a very stable structure. That's good in many ways, but sometimes innovation, you have to push a little harder for it in academia. What would this actually look like? I began to start thinking about mutations and how in nature every form of life is the result of a small change that has a big effect over time. And I realized that at my art school, the Hartford Art School, there are these very high impact, low residency programs for the MFA. And that if I could make a small change in those programs, I might be able to do something that would come close to what I'd like to design. And that type of education also reflects the experience we had in Ghana when we had a short amount of time and it really came together in terms of an impactful education. I was also thinking about diversity. If you've had the good fortune of visiting a tropical rainforest, you have never heard the kind of pulsing and vibrating of species diversity in a habitat, and you'll remember that sound into the future wherever you go. In terms of graduate education, what if instead of having artists just be trained by artists and art historians, we included ecologists, city planners, tribal elders, community activists? And what if, for the students, we brought in students from all over the world, students from different cultures with very different life experiences, but all united in a vision of a more sustainable future? I also considered edge environments and how a tide pool where the sea meets the land has more life forms than either the land or the sea alone. And I thought if we had a truly cross-disciplinary program where the scientists were in conversation with the artists, ideas would be generated that neither party could come up with if they were just with people in their own fields. I also put a lot of time into considering yield. An example of yield in nature is what's happening right now in the autumn. The leaves are falling, they'll disintegrate over the next few months, and they'll provide nutrition for the trees. For an art program, what if we built into the budget scholarships to help students during this time of the student debt crisis? What if we worked with communities to find ways that organizations could sponsor an artist and help them with their tuition in exchange for having an artist in residence? And what if a grad program could actually build public art for the city of Hartford? So at that point, about 2 years ago, I had a conceptual framework, and I brought it to experts in my field, and I asked, what would you do if this was your idea? What am I missing? And what questions do you think I should ask next? I want to shift now to what the students will take away from this program. These students will understand ecology. They'll have had experiences with fieldwork, working with scientists. They'll understand systems thinking, which is a huge skill for creativity of any kind. And they'll be able to go to any location and look, observe, listen, and understand not only the way a site presents itself, but to understand that each of these sites in the Americas is a tapestry of indigenous histories, colonial histories, and contemporary realities. They'll also understand materials. There's a bit of reskilling involved, whether you're writing code or you're using more ancient materials and processes. You're working on a continuum of technology, and our students will get their hands wet in the process. They'll also understand the cycle of materials, from cradle to grave, where materials come from and what happens to them into the deep future. We took care to think about all of the skills a contemporary artist uses. We use writing skills, entrepreneurial skills. We understand how to collaborate, how to facilitate. As we bring our work into communities, there are many practical skills that we use, and our students will receive training in all of those skills. So now you've gotten a little tour of a process of taking an idea into a curriculum. I want to think for a moment about what you might take away from this. As we approach the future, we all know it's going to be turbulent. We don't know how climate change will unfold. But I want you to remember that there are some seeds that only open up with fire. And there are many ways you can take a small idea and use it for big effect. Thank you.